and on demand. All together, all in one place for you to enjoy.
It's whatever kind of adventure we want it to be.
Get it all with Spectrum TV.
Whether it's our stories, the warmth of our laugh, or our family's secret sauce, we all bring something different to the table. So make some space. The power of connection is waiting right outside your comfort zone. Learn how you can help strengthen your community at belongingbeginswithus.org/teamup.
Spectrum News Plus. Local stories, connecting communities. Streaming now on the Spectrum News app and free with your Spectrum subscription.
I'm Sharon Tazwell. Here's your Spectrum News in 90. A community 70 miles north of Seattle faced rushed evacuations Friday as swollen waterways spilled into homes. Rivers across western Washington inundated towns and homes around Burlington with fast-moving floodwaters so deep it reached the roofs of homes. Dozens of people needed to be rescued as water in some areas reached up to 15 feet deep. Water levels for at least 4 rivers hit record highs.
Luckily, we've got multiple boats all in up and down the river and different rescue tools and a lot of swiftwater techs.
A federal judge issued an order prohibiting immigration officials from detaining Kilmar Abrego Garcia. The order came as Garcia appeared at a scheduled appointment at an ice field office roughly 14 hours after he walked out of an immigration detention facility in Pennsylvania. During brief remarks, Garcia urged others to, quote, stand tall against what he described as injustices carried out by the government. And former Michigan football coach Sharon Moore was arraigned Friday on 3 criminal charges, including felony home invasion. Prosecutors say Moore threatened to kill himself in front of a woman after she threatened to end their alleged affair. The university fired the 39-year-old Wednesday, saying he had an inappropriate affair with a staff member. And that is a look at your Spectrum News in 90.
Meteorologist Alan Auglis here with a look at your weather on the ones across the country. It remains snowy across the northern tier into the weekend, but the bigger story, really the dangerous cold across the Great Lakes and upper Midwest Ohio Valley this weekend, and the Pacific Northwest, a bit of a break in the rain before more rain moves back in. We'll talk about the details coming up this half hour.
Welcome to The Big Deal. I'm Errol Lewis, national political anchor at Spectrum News. This program focuses on the future of our country and its people. Time is running out before millions of Americans face a jump in the cost of health care. That's the big deal this week. Senators are no closer to reaching a deal on extending subsidies for health care plans tied to the Affordable Care Act. That's all set to expire in the new year. On Thursday, the Senate rejected both Republican and Democratic bills. The issue has been center stage in Congress for months, but with lawmakers set to leave town for the holidays next week, it is highly unlikely an extension will occur before the end of the year.
You can't just do a blanket extension without reforms. It is rife with waste, fraud, and abuse. It's been driving up insurance premiums for people in this country at 3 times the rate of inflation, and so you've got to have some reforms to make this work.
Senate Republicans just shoved the American people off the side of a cliff with no parachute and with an anchor tied to their feet. Now Republicans have all but guaranteed that tens of millions of people will see their premiums double or triple or more next year.
Joining me now with more are 2 top political analysts. James Barragon is a political anchor for Spectrum News 1 in Austin, Texas. Cassie Semien is a political reporter for Spectrum News based in Washington, D.C. And Cassie, I assume that members of Congress are going to get an earful from their constituents during the holiday break. Is there any chance of a last-minute extension or compromise to stop millions of people from losing their health insurance? And by the way, where is the Trump administration in all of this conversation?
Yeah, so that last-minute push is really kind of taking the shape of a legislative tool that we've become really familiar with here on Capitol Hill over the last several months. It's called a discharge petition, and right now we have two of those to address the subsidies, one led by a Democrat, the other by a moderate Republican. So there have been at least a dozen Republicans so far that have signed on to the discharge petitions to try to force that vote next week to extend those subsidies around Republican leadership. They do propose some reforms, so that means only 206 Democrats would be needed to force that vote next week. It's not a guarantee that the Senate would pass such a bill if one of these discharge petitions is successful, but it gives some moderate swing Republicans that cover they're going to need when it comes to elections next year, to give them some cover, saying, look, we tried to stop these premiums from skyrocketing, but it doesn't look like, at least right now, it will be successful. The president, meanwhile, he is really uninterested in extending those subsidies. Instead, he's proposing those health saving account money to give money to people directly. But of course, that likely wouldn't be enough to help people who are looking at seeing their premiums double and triple when the new year hits. So the clock is really ticking here, Errol, for Congress to do something. And it's looking right now like these subsidies could end come December 31st.
Okay, now on a different topic, James, this week Republicans in Indiana's state Senate voted not to redraw congressional maps, which would have boosted the Republican majority in the House of Representatives next year. In your state, in Texas, just last week, the Supreme Court overruled a lower court and gave Texas permission to use newly drawn congressional maps that could help Republicans win as many as 5 more House seats. The redistricting wars, it sounds like, are still going hot and heavy.
Yeah, they are still going hot and heavy, and it was a huge victory for Texas Republicans who are trying to expand to those 5 seats, as you mentioned. This is all in a battle to hold on to the Republican slim majority in Congress, but there's some reporting now that potentially Republicans could have overplayed their hands, and that's because a lot of the districts that they're targeting are majority Hispanic, which of course is a demographic that went for the president and for Republicans in 2024 here in Texas. But with the economy the way it is, with some of the immigration policies that have been implemented, Hispanics here in Texas may be having a little bit of buyer's remorse. I think Republicans are watching that. It's going to be a battle next year.
Okay. Cassie, meanwhile, this week, Kilmar Abrego Garcia was released from immigration detention. He had been mistakenly detained and deported to a notorious prison in El Salvador and quickly became a rallying point, a symbol for critics of the Trump administration's mass deportation agenda. This week, the Homeland Security Secretary, Kristi Noem, testified before lawmakers and was grilled about her efforts to deport immigrants who are lawfully seeking asylum in the U.S. Let's take a listen, and then we'll talk about it.
If your department then deports anyone with an ongoing asylum application, you are violating the law, correct?
Joe Biden left us with...
I'm not asking about Joe Biden. I'm asking you a specific question. If your department deports anyone with an ongoing asylum application, you are violating the law. Is that correct?
It was greatly violated when they allowed...
I'm asking you.
So, I mean, Cassie, these seem like pretty serious setbacks to the deportation campaign between the court ruling and hearings like that one. Is there any sign that the White House or ICE might dial back some of the more aggressive tactics?
I mean, I don't really think there is a sign that the administration plans to slow down its immigration crackdown. I feel like you can argue it's only ramping up because since the shooting of those 2 members of the National Guard members just before Thanksgiving, the Trump administration has halted asylum decisions, reviewing cases of asylum granted under the Biden administration. They're reexamining some green card holders. It's worth noting that the shooter arrived from Afghanistan under the Biden administration, but was granted asylum under the Trump administration. But earlier this year, regardless, Errol, the Trump administration here doesn't really appear to be slowing down its efforts. And the release of Kilmar Abrego Garcia could be seen as a blow to the administration's efforts, but it's definitely not a knockout punch. And they're going to keep pushing forward, it seems, until the courts provide a check on them, which so far the Supreme Court, at least, hasn't been inclined to do.
Okay. Now, James, there was a big deal in Texas this week. Democratic Representative Jasmine Crockett launched a campaign for the Senate in an attempt to unseat the Republican incumbent, Senator John Cornyn. Is this a long shot or even symbolic candidacy, or does she really have a chance? And what issues do you expect her to run on?
Well, Errol, I think realistically, when your party hasn't won statewide office in 30 years, you have to look realistically at what are the chances of winning. But despite that, Democrats feel that they have a candidate in Jasmine Crockett. She's certainly been in national news. She's gone toe-to-toe with the president. She's combative. She's seen as a fighter. And it could be that she is the kind of candidate that Texas Democrats need. Now, of course, she's not the only one running. There's also State Representative James Talarico, so she'll have to get through that primary first. But both candidates are focused on an economic message, a message of that it's not left versus right, but top versus bottom. And that will be what they will be hammering the Republicans on, because they see the Republicans as vulnerable, particularly if in the primary they are able to knock out incumbent John Cornyn.
And Cassie, another big deal this week. Miami elected its first Democratic mayor in nearly 3 decades. That's Eileen Higgins, who is set to make history as the first woman to lead Miami after defeating a Republican who had been endorsed by President Donald Trump. Is this seen as a rebuke of the president's policies?
I mean, you can definitely read it that way, and that's how Democrats are branding this. Her victory came the same night that the president was in Pennsylvania calling affordability a hoax, and Higgins told reporters afterwards that she believes talking about affordability is what actually helped her win over voters. Obviously, Miami is a very expensive city to live in, and so I think this is a rebuke on the president in some regard, but it's also the sign of a successful campaign for Democrats. And when you look at, her race and Zohran Mamdani in New York, for example, right? 2 very different candidates, both talking about affordability, both listening to what the real concerns of voters are and then tailoring their campaign to address that specific issue. And so I think that Democrats need to take a hard look at some of these races and see what the secret sauce is that helped these Democrats win these races and carry that into next year if they actually want to flip the House. It's not necessarily attacking Trump. It's about attacking the policies and how it's affecting everyday Americans in their communities. So I think it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out come next year if they're able to actually learn something from that.
Okay, and now President Trump gave a speech this week that was supposed to address the affordability crisis, but he ended up telling his audience that the economy is booming, prices are coming down, and that affordability is a, quote, hoax. Is that how people are seeing it in Texas?
Well, President Trump is very popular here in Texas, but facts are a stubborn thing. People go to the groceries and see those high sticker prices. If that continues into next year, the economy and affordability is going to be a difficult issue for the president and Republicans.
All right. Thanks very much, James. Great talking with you. Great talking with you as well, Cassie. Coming up next, minimum wage increases are set to kick in across more than a dozen states on New Year's Day. We will bring you the details and tell you what it means for the economy. That's next on The Big Deal.
Spectrum Noticias, we recognize that our community is vibrant and diverse.
Spectrum Noticias delivers balanced coverage of the stories that matter in our communities and across the country.
Our journalists are based in the neighborhoods we cover, ensuring you get in-depth reporting on what's happening in the places we call home.
So join us at Spectrum Noticias. We're always on, always there for you.
Now available on your TV. Check your local listings. Also available on the Spectrum News app.
Spectrum TV, isn't that only live TV?
No, it's only all my favorite streaming apps with live TV.
Okay.
It's only all included at no extra cost, and that's the magic of math. Will this be on the test? Sure, why not?
It's only one simple payment for all our TV. We gotta simplify and win. Winning is equally important.
If not, more so.
Yeah!
Only Spectrum TV, fixed TV.
Being a cowboy, well, I don't know anything different. I had a very successful career. Life was fast. I was preparing physically. I wasn't doing anything mentally. And then I got hurt. I dug into mental health. I wanted to be better as a person. I start my day with a workout. I live life 8 seconds at a time. Find a place to stop and just breathe. Love your mind.
I'm Sandra, this is Jorge, and we were adopted in 2019. I remember when they first came to us, Michael was already a teenager. The whole cliche of they're so lucky to have you guys, and it's the other way around. They have changed our family for the better. They chose to love us. They didn't have to. They chose us. Family.
Learn about adopting a teen from foster care. You can't imagine the reward. Visit adoptuskids.org.
We're back with the big deal. Millions of workers will see bigger paychecks starting on January 1st. That's because the minimum wage is set to increase in 19 states, as well as 49 cities and counties. That's according to the National Employment Law Project. Later in the year, 4 additional states will also raise their base pay. As the federal minimum wage, meanwhile, remains stuck at $7.25 an hour, unchanged since 2009, individual states and municipalities are stepping in. They have raised minimum wages through ballot measures, through legislation, and in some cases automatically by adjusting wages to match inflation. Joining me now with more on all of this is Professor Alora Derenoncourt. She's an assistant professor of economics at Princeton University. Thanks for being here, Professor. And next month, 12 states will reach a minimum wage of $15 an hour. 3 states and 40 localities will hit $17 per hour, including New York, New Jersey, and California. Should we understand this as a nationwide shift toward higher wages?
Yes, certainly. Wages have been increasing basically since the recovery from the pandemic. And it makes sense that the minimums are also increasing across the states to keep pace with this.
Many Americans, especially in the South, are earning the old federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour. Can you put that in perspective? I mean, if inflation is moving at around 3% these days, staying at $7.25 amounts to a loss of purchasing power. Families are not just stalling out, but really falling behind at that wage, right?
That's right. The real value of the minimum wage has been declining. The federal minimum wage has been declining basically since the late 1960s. If you look in today's dollars, the highest minimum wage that we've had in the U.S. was in around 1968 and would be closer to something like $15 an hour today.
You know, I see from your writing that the federal minimum wage is not just about economics, but also a civil rights issue. You mentioned the 1960s. One of the demands of that 1963 March on Washington, where Martin Luther King Jr. gave his famous speech, was to increase the minimum wage. And you have written about why that was especially important for black families and actually was a measure intended to address racial injustice.
Yes, exactly. When the federal minimum wage was first introduced, it actually didn't cover all sectors of the economy, including services and retail, which were important sectors for black workers and especially black workers in the South. So when the coverage of the law extended to those groups of workers, it had as big an impact on racial inequality as civil rights legislation.
Really interesting. I mean, based on your research, where does the earnings divide stand right now between white workers and their black and Hispanic neighbors? Have recent state and local increases started to close the gap?
So earnings gaps are still substantial. As of 2024, the weekly earnings gap at the median between Hispanic and white workers was about 24%, and for black and white workers, 19%. So these are very sizable gaps. It is true that we've seen some improvements in the gaps in recent years, primarily due to, competition in the economy and tighter labor markets. But if we look back over the past 10 to 15 years, once states took the initiative on increasing their minimum wages, that has definitely also helped reduce the gap between these groups of workers.
You know, in some cases, I know the politics can be sticky, but we've seen voters weigh in directly on raising the minimum wage, including ballot measures in places like Alaska and Missouri. When those measures go before the public, how do they tend to perform? What does the data tell us about how Americans feel about actually raising the minimum wage?
So first of all, raising the minimum wage, including the federal minimum wage, is an incredibly popular policy for Americans. Polling data suggests that, well over a majority of Americans support raising the minimum. Over half support raising the minimum to $15 an hour. Over 70% support raising the federal minimum overall. And at the state level, even in Republican-leaning states, these types of ballot initiatives tend to pass with majority of support.
So now, what I remember most from the pandemic was a lot of these minimum wage jobs were deemed essential during the pandemic. Grocery store workers, home health aides, cleaners, people who help other people to do their job. What does the research show us about how boosting the minimum wage affects overall employment and the overall economy?
So if you were to take the lessons from classic, economic theory, you might be concerned about raising the minimum and having that cause significant job loss in the economy. But the past 30 years of empirical research in economics on the effects of minimum wages on jobs have shown that the employment effects are actually quite small, oftentimes, minimal, and in some cases can even be positive. And that's because one thing that raising the minimum does is it makes those types of very difficult jobs more appealing for workers, increases retention. And because there's such churn in this part of the labor market, raising the wage can actually keep workers longer on those jobs and save some costs for employers.
As an economist, does it make sense to, once the minimum has been raised, to index it to inflation so that you're not having a political fight over it every 5 or 10 or 20 years?
Yeah, this is greatly preferable, not only so that workers know that their wages are going to keep pace with the cost of living, but also so that employers know what types of increases to anticipate and expect as they're making their plans over several years ahead. Mandated minimum wage increases are sometimes necessary when there hasn't been such a policy, but it's typically easier both for workers and employers if the increases are known and scheduled ahead of time.
Okay, great discussion, very helpful. Thanks very much, Professor.
Thanks so much for having me.
We're not done just yet. Coming up next, we will talk about the demise of the American penny. Stay with The Big Deal.
The stories that touch our border affect us all. That's why at Spectrum News Plus, we don't just cover these communities. Our dedicated reporting team also calls them home. That perspective allows us to take an in-depth look, going beyond the politics, to see the impact on people's lives and what it means for you and your community. Balanced border coverage that tells the full story here on Spectrum News Plus. Available on all your favorite devices, exclusively on Spectrum.
It's only a hike. It's only made possible by Spectrum Business connecting healthcare providers of all sizes. Like hospitals relying on the Spectrum Fiber broadband network with industry-leading reliability. Practices keeping patient data safe with advanced security. Pharmacies accessing records in the cloud without fail. It's tailored connectivity solutions built for life-changing moments. It's only a hike. It's only everything. Spectrum Business.
There's nothing quite like the feeling of going to the theater. Onstage celebrates that excitement every week by taking you behind the scenes with the latest news and in-depth interviews of the hottest shows on and off Broadway. So grab a seat, because this is a show you won't want to miss. Join us Saturday nights at 7:30 Eastern, 6:30 Central for Onstage.
Onstage is presented by your Tri-State Cadillac dealers. Discover which Cadillac is right for you and elevate your journey.
Mom was always organized, but she started forgetting to pay her bills on time.
And she'd buy the same gifts over and over. Telling the girls about my Alzheimer's diagnosis was really hard.
At first we had our cries, but then we were like, okay, let's make a plan.
Early detection gave us time to adapt together. It's so important for you to think about what you can do and making the most of what you have.
If you or your family are noticing changes, it could be Alzheimer's. Talk about seeing a doctor together.
time you used a penny? Do you remember?
I think a couple years ago.
I feel like when I was little, I used to collect pennies, like in those like big glass jars, but probably not since I was a kid.
Maybe at the store like the other day when I needed like 3 cents, but that's when I have it in my purse, which is very rare.
Kind of crazy, honestly. Like, who would have thought like a penny that's been around for centuries just to be ending out of nowhere like that?
Get rid of the nickel next. I don't really carry pennies anymore. It's not that important. I think they cost more to make than they do what they're worth, so no big deal.
Thanks for staying with The Big Deal. As 2025 draws to a close, America is saying goodbye to the penny. The U.S. Mint struck its final batch of pennies during a ceremonial send-off in Philadelphia last month. The Treasury Department says that the coin simply became irrelevant and too expensive to make, with production costs rising to nearly 4 cents per penny. But here's a fun fact. The penny is not the first American coin to get the axe. Meet the half cent, worth 1/200th of a dollar. It circulated for more than 60 years before being discontinued in 1857 for the very same reason. The production cost became too high for its low face value. As for the penny, the coin was introduced in 1793 under the direction of the first Secretary of the Treasury, Alexander Hamilton. Its earliest versions featured Lady Liberty, and that lasted until 1909, when it was redesigned with the portrait of Abraham Lincoln that we all recognize today. The penny once carried a lot of value, and you can still see its legacy every time you fill up your tank. You might have noticed over the years that the price per gallon always ends in 9/10 of a cent, like on this gas station in Illinois, which is advertising a regular gallon at $3.69 9/10 of a cent. So why not just round up? Well, the fractional pricing can be traced back to a 1932 law that created the very first federal tax on gasoline, used to help build new highways. When that tax kicked in, gas stations passed it directly to consumers, and instead of raising prices by a full cent, which at the time was a big deal, people hated the tax, so they chose to tack on 9/10 of a cent instead. It made the price appear lower. That's a marketing strategy known as just below pricing. Retailers use it all the time. This Christmas tree costs $53.99, a price point that feels noticeably cheaper to consumers somehow than $54, even though the difference is just a penny. Nearly 90 years later, fractional pricing remains the norm at gas stations nationwide. But over the years, there have actually been efforts to eliminate that. Iowa briefly banned fractional pricing in 1985 before reversing course 4 years later. And in California, one gas station owner tried rounding in 2006 on his own by setting the price of a gallon at $2.99, getting rid of that additional 9/10. But the gas station's customers didn't even notice, and the retailer saw a loss of about $23 a day. As for the penny itself, more than 3 billion coins remain in circulation. They are still considered legal tender, and they're accepted at retailers and businesses nationwide, including, of course, your nearest gas station. That's going to do it for this episode of The Big Deal. We'll see you next week. Stay tuned to your local Spectrum station.
Friday nights, The Big Deal with Errol Lewis, where Spectrum News' local political journalists break down the most important issues shaping our nation.
Here's the deal. People need a place to explore national issues that have an impact on their community. To understand those issues better, we're bringing together our team of local political journalists from across the country to break down what's happening. So join us every week to catch up on the key stories making a big difference across the nation and in your local community.
Watch The Big Deal with Errol Lewis Friday nights at 9 Eastern, 8 Central on Spectrum News Plus. Available on all of your favorite devices, exclusively on Spectrum.
It's only a slice. It's only made possible by Spectrum, connecting businesses of all sizes, like small businesses, instantly serving up orders and inventory on the Spectrum Fiber broadband network, and factories, seamlessly connecting to farmers in the field with tailored solutions that always deliver. It's only a slice. It's only everything. Get your business free fiber-powered internet forever. Call to find out how.
Weather can be beautiful, inconvenient, and at times, powerful. And it affects everything we do. At Spectrum News Plus, our weather experts update you with the information and the context you need so you can better plan your day. And we do it every 10 minutes. We're the calm in the storm. Weather on the Ones on Spectrum News Plus, exclusively on Spectrum. And get your weather anytime on the Spectrum News app. Spectrum News Plus. Local stories, connecting communities. Streaming now on the Spectrum News app